This is One on One. We are pleased to welcome Andy Serwer, who is editor-in-chief, Yahoo Finance, and also editor of American Enterprise, A History of Business in America. You edited this book, didn't you?
Did, yes. Mm-hmm.
Why?
Well, because it was a real opportunity actually to serve. It was helping the Smithsonian Institution. And when you get a call from the Smithsonian, it's maybe not quite like the Baseball Hall of Fame, but to me, it was a real opportunity. Exactly, it's as close as I'm going to get because I can never hit a curveball.
Right. Join the
help
club.
The Smithsonian, to help the Smithsonian, help them put on this exhibit about the history of American business. This is a book that's being put out in conjunction with that exhibit.
Well, I want to make it clear, you spent 30 years as managing editor, just about 30 years at Fortune magazine.
That's right. 30 years at Fortune, 9 years almost as editor, I should say.
You know, Andy, you've spoken to, interviewed, dealt with the titans of industry, I mean, the giants in this world. People like Steve Jobs, right? Mm-hmm. Warren Buffett.
Yep.
All kinds of people who today we try to understand, you know, what made them tick, made them successful, how they come back from certain failures. But you also go back, and in this book, this very terrific book, you know, American Enterprise, A History of Business in America, you look at what you call 4 eras of business, if I could. Mm-hmm. You call it, and follow us on this, folks, the merchant era, the 1770s to the 1850s, the corporate era, from the 1860s to the 1930s, the consumer era, we know it well, 1940s to 1970s, and finally the global era, 1980s to today. Go back, merchant era, go.
Right. The merchant era was really the founding of our country, and it was when the great merchants moved goods overseas and really started to develop our economy. It's colonial times going up into the Civil War, Steve.
Okay. Most significant thing that happened during that time?
Was the expansion into this great nation that we know today, the Manifest Destiny period, and really creating a national identity, becoming a major global power.
And let's talk about the corporate era, 1860s to 1930s. Why corporate era?
Well, that's when the big companies were founded. If you think about it, it's really the Civil War to the beginning of World War II. And so it's the modern economy, the origins of the modern economy.
Is this Ford?
So, yeah, Ford was founded during that period, absolutely. And of course, the assembly line, everyone having a car, the steel industry, Thomas Edison, think about all those huge kind of corporate business events happened during that time period.
Who did you talk to, by the way, to get this information?
Well, we talked to, the museum curators talked to, you know, hundreds and hundreds of historians, business people, professors, and everyday people to sort of try to figure out and determine what the most important trends were and what to touch upon. And it wasn't just, you know, the generals or the CEOs. It was everyday people. We deal with slavery in the book as well, and that was a big part of our economy, a terrible part of our economy and a part of our history, but a very real part that we couldn't ignore.
The part that people may not like the name of it, the consumer era, 1940s to 1970s.
I like to call that the Mad Men era. I mean, if you think about it, it's really the cool retro, the Cadillac with the fins and the television and the TV dinners and the beginning of all the brands that we know, Steve. I mean, and advertising. It really does sort of, I mean, I say Mad Men, it kind of sums it up and you immediately
Sure.
get what that is, right?
And during that time, consumption?
Yeah, we
Huge.
started...
Savings not.
Right. Well, we saved, but mostly, you're right, consuming was a big thing. We had, the way to think about it is after World War II, we were the only giant left standing, and we had disposable income. So we were licking our wounds a little bit coming back from World War II, but by the 1950s, we had money to spend on televisions, on rock and roll, on things from Sears, on 2 cars, on maybe a vacation home. It became a consumption economy.
Because then, for those of us who were aficionados, people who love Mad Men,
yeah,
did they get it right in terms of how powerful advertising was at that time and how television, as it was coming up in the 60s and early 70s, influenced our buying decisions?
I really think they did. I mean, if you think about it, so much of the stuff, you know, you really don't need. There's a real keeping up with the Joneses element in our economy, for better or for worse. And, you know, that's why you have sort of a counter movement of, in the 60s, getting back to the land and stripping things away. The hippies, were kind of a reaction to that consumerism to an extent. And then, of course, they become co-opted into the culture as well. So I don't think it's right to underestimate the power of advertising and television. I think they got it right.
Global area, 1980s to today.
Right.
Why global?
Well, because the world got smaller. And, it could have been called the internet era.
I was going to ask you why
right.
it wasn't the technology era.
Well,
internet era.
it is both. And, it's sort of a chicken and egg thing, though. Which came first, globalism or technology? Obviously, they're very intertwined. And you can't really have globalism without the technology. But it's not just the internet. It's better airplanes, it's better ships, it's better telecommunications. And, now we're so used to getting live pictures from the battlefield in Afghanistan and seeing things happening in China or in Africa or South America.
In HD.
Yeah, in HD, live, for better or for worse,
Exactly.
again, on that one. But, it's one world, the world is flat, and all those kinds of things. And we're just trying to figure out right now, all of us, the upside and the downside of that.
And the impact of 2008, the economic world imploded
Yes.
for many. What are we living with in the second half of 2015 and beyond from that?
Well, there's a real reckoning there. And, speaking about the globalism thing, prior to 2008 and the financial meltdown, we were telling the rest of the world, we have this great American capitalist system, particularly the Chinese. You guys should really emulate.
Yeah, look at us.
Right? Look at us. We have it all figured out. And the Chinese sort of went along with it to a degree, making their economy more like a market economy. Then the crash happened, and it actually added to the firepower of the hardliners saying, you know what, we don't want to be like America. And I think the rest of the world felt that way too. The closer you were to the American economy at that point, the more you got burned. And that didn't do us any great shakes, did it? And, there are implications that we're still feeling and figuring out today.
You interviewed Steve Jobs, and a lot of times he would get angry at you, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a contentious relationship. So many other giants like
Bill Gates, you mentioned Warren Buffett, Jamie Dimon, on and on and on. I'm just trying to,
well, that's good enough, Hank Paulson. So
yeah.
that sets up my question.
Yeah, right.
I've been asking some people who know a little bit about leadership and those who know leadership this question.
Right.
I have to ask you, from all those folks you've talked to, what would you say you've taken from them as the most significant lesson about leadership in business? What is it?
I think it's communication. I think it's the ability to communicate and have people buy into your vision of how you want to lead. People want to follow leaders, not ideas. It's actually an interesting distinction. If you look at, say, Steve Jobs and Warren Buffett, you could say these guys are absolutely opposites. I mean, Warren Buffett is, avuncular. We know he's a lot more than that. And of course, you got to be brilliant and got to work 29 hours a day. That sort of goes without saying. But Steve Jobs, not a particularly empathetic person. Warren Buffett, more empathetic, tries to really understand how to make people work. But both of them are excellent communicators. I mean, just excellent. Steve Jobs doing those keynote speeches for Apple. And just one more thing, Steve.
Yeah, that's right.
I've got an iPhone here. You've never
That's
heard
what he
of
would
it
do
before,
all the time.
Right, exactly, that whole thing. And Warren Buffett just being folksy and going on CNBC and talking about, well, I just have this little thing that I want to do. I mean, they make you watch.
People follow people.
That's right.
American Enterprise, a history of business in America. Andy, I want to thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve.
Great stuff. Go out and get the book. Steve Adubato from the Tisch WNET studio in the heart of Manhattan Lincoln Center. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Thank you very much, Andy.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 25 years of broadcast excellence. This special edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato is brought to you from the Tisch WNET studios at Lincoln Center. Funding has been provided by TD Bank, the New Jersey Education Association, NJIT, Barnabas Health, MagnaCare, New Jersey Sharing Network, and by the Mental Health Association in New Jersey. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area.